Yeah.
Cool. How's Trex? Looking good, dude. Looking a bit younger than usual.
Thanks, mate. Am I really? That's good news. I don't feel it. But yeah, all good, mate. All good. Just took a bit of a break because I had to get a seasonal job over Christmas, so to like help out. But it was a pretty cool job, working on York Christmas markets for my mates. Like he's a Danish tattoo artist, so he sells like all kinds of like pagan t-shirts and t-shirts with his artwork on and artwork and everything. So it was pretty fun, to be fair.
He's Danish, or his artwork's Danish?
He's Danish. He's originally from Denmark. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Nice.
That's who did all me.
Really, is it?
He did all my tattoo and everything.
Show. Give us a close up. Let's have a look.
So
Sweet.
It's hard to.
Nice.
Oh, there we go.
I can see the quality of the artwork though.
So yeah, I was like a bit of a walking advertisement for him as well, I guess. So it was good. I'm going back to do they're doing the Viking Festival in York, so I'll be back there again, just helping him out for a couple of days. He's doing like a miniature kind of tattoo convention. He's got his favorite artists all into, like the Norse kind of style. So he's flown a load of people in. So I'm going over to help out for a few days at the end of Feb as well. So it's cool. It's nice and easy going. Yeah, what about you? What have you been up to? You keeping well?
Funnily enough, about 10 minutes ago, I was just talking about the Jorvik Venter.
How are you?
In York. And that, like, when I was a kid, you go in and the people that had been there before, you go, oh, you go in there and it stinks of poo. Yeah. No, it doesn't smell of poo. And you go in and it stinks of poo. There's a poo machine.
Yeah, it's mental, isn't it? Somebody's job was to recreate the smell of Viking era York. Like, it's bonkers. And the worst thing,
it's all organic now, so they just use actual poo.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got one though, haven't they? They've got a fossilized, what they call a coprolite in the museum. Yeah. Well, never mind.
Oh, wait a minute, a fossilized Viking poo.
Yeah, they've got one in the museum. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. Apparently, it's really important because it offers an insight into the diet or something. But maybe someone's just got a weird thing going on.
It's not that important, is it?
No.
What were they growing? Crops. They're eating chickens, beef, lamb, probably a bit of horse, grains, and vegetables, like we do, apart from the horse. Well, not on purpose.
No, not on purpose. Cool. Just when Iceland get into a bit of trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Bit of donkey in there. So, so what have you actually been studying recently?
I've been pursuing the Pelasgians, been looking at those. So kind of looking at the areas that they're associated with, what the lexicons say, and then trying to dig up as many of the original sources that kind of talk about them. So the main bulk of the way I'd sectioned it into my own studies was their connection with regions within what we would consider modern day Greece today. Then their connections to what we would consider modern day Italy today. So there seems to be connections with Etruria and also Rome. Then I did connections with the Pelasgians in what we would consider Asia Minor, so like the regions of Turkey and stuff. And then I did an episode just on Larissa specifically and Pelasgus. And I did an episode on the Pelasgian letters as well. So I kind of broke it down into little areas, one looking at the letters, one looking at the religious practices, and then the classical sources and stuff.
I take it to like Proto-Indo-European, or are they some other descent? Because it's we're talking about very ancient times now, aren't we? Can I just say one thing before I do that? Can I bring you a bit closer to the camera, or bring
me?
Because you're a tiny head.
Sure. Yep. Is that any better?
Oh, it's gorgeous.
There we go.
Nice one.
So I'm still 50-50. I mean, obviously it says that they were predominantly Greeks. They inhabited largely Greek areas, certainly very early on. Some authors describe them as speaking a barbarian tongue. However,
what does that mean to you? What does barbarian tongue mean to you?
I mean, just non-Hellenic.
Non-Greek.
Non-Greek. That's what they were kind of meaning by barbaros, just a non-Greek, somebody who's not speaking that language. So it seems to imply there's a variation in the language. I mean, whether it's a proto form of Greek, that may or may not be the case. It's hard to really say from the text, which is mainly what I'm dealing with. However, there are mentions of, I think it's Diodorus Siculus in particular. He says that the Phoenician letters were actually Pelasgian in origin. And yeah, it's really interesting. You know, he says, yep, they're called Phoenician because they were brought to Greece by Cadmus. However, he says the first people to use them were Pelasgians, and as such, it's referred to as the Pelasgian letters. And there's also other sources which say that the Latin, the Pelasgian letters were taken to Italy as well, and that they gave birth to the Latin language also. And you also have sources which say that practices such as the Lupercalia and the Saturnalia, that they were also Pelasgian in origin. So a lot of these places, they seem to have deep connections. But going back to your question, whether they're Proto-Indo-European or not, they certainly seem to have, there's some sources that indicate that they're certainly Proto-Indo-European. Obviously, I think for some of the sources saying that the ancient Greeks kind of lends to the notion of that as well. However, having said that, the Samothracian mysteries as well was another one that there were some sources say they founded also. And one of the sources that leads me to believe that they were potentially Proto-Indo-European is one of the sources say that they were originally milk drinkers, agriculturalists. Says that they were pastoralists, my bad, they were pastoralists, that's the word I was looking for, and that they were later converted to a life of agriculture. Now the Yamnaya culture, which are generally associated with Proto-Indo-Europeans, they certainly seem to be that way inclined. You know, nomadic horse tribes. The Scythians are notoriously described in some of these texts as galactophagoi, so those who eat or consume milk. Yep. So yes, and then when you look at Samothrace, some of the artwork.
Just to clarify for anybody watching, the reason why milk's important is because, well, the genes of our ancestors were able to keep on drinking milk into adulthood, and so it was a source of food. So you can trace those genes back roughly to northern Iran, which is where these Proto-Indo-Europeans are from, the Aryans.
Yeah, that's it.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's good to clarify these things for sure. But yeah, you're completely right. And they seem to, as you said, originate in this region, and they seem to spread out. And I mean, in the case of, for example, that the Hatti, the Hittites came down, found these indigenous people there who spoke neither Proto-Indo-European nor Semitic, and they basically subjugated them to some degree. They took over them, imposed an elite class. However, there was some transfer both ways, so they seem to adopt some of the Hatti deities, for example. They still, even generations down the line, they're still called the region, the land of Hatti, and they also adopted some certain phrases in the Hattian language. And I think it could be what we have with the Pelasgians. I believe that they might have an element of being Proto-Indo-European, but also an element of being autochthonous, because some of the sources do say that Pelasgus, for example, who is the progenitor of the Pelasgians, who they're named for, that he is born out of the earth, as in autochthonous, native.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, it also says Pelasgus was one of the first people to meet Demeter and to teach the people agriculture. So it seems to me like they're a hybrid, or I shouldn't say it seems to me that they are, but it seems to me that there's evidence that points towards them being one of these earlier nations that have come into contact with agriculturalists agriculturalists and have some kind of early mixing of the two groups, agriculturalists and pastoralists. And
as I remember,
go ahead, mate.
The Hittites, those what did you call them? Hatti. Where are they from? Are they southern Mediterranean? I seem to remember being like they take over Egypt for a while and a few other places.
Yeah, they did. They did expand down that way. So originally, the land of Hatti, it's south of the Black Sea in Asia Minor, kind of in the center of Anatolia, almost bridging between the forces in the east and the Mediterranean, and they seem to control this region of trade between the two. I mean, even
an
Troy.
important area. Such an important area at the time. How many things evolved from that area is absolutely amazing. See, it feels quite insignificant in this day and age, but certainly back then there was so much going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they even believe that this is where agriculture kind of boomed. So you had the Natufians, who were kind of the first people who they say began agriculture. They started selective breeding crops for favorable changes. They were in the Eastern Mediterranean, and they moved up into Asia Minor. They came into contact with the hunter-gatherers that were there, and ultimately these two people mixed and created what they call early European farmers. And these early European farmers then migrated into Europe, and eventually reaching as far as the British Isles. And as they migrated west, they come into contact with Western hunter-gatherers. Now there's more of those in the West. So as these people move, the more further west you get, the more Western hunter-gatherer that is typically found, and less of the early European farmers. But as you then move back east, that kind of like flips.
Well,
so
you see in a lot of the early mythological fragments that we get, there's often this civilizing figure and a wild man, and it's often the juxtaposition of those two that gets things moving along. Enki and Enkidu, Gilgamesh and Enkidu.
Okay.
Those are two perfect. I mean, that's Sumerian. That's a bit before then, but it's this thing of there's civilization, but you can be too civilized and you can be weak, and then you've got and too glued to the rules and regulations of society, like too immovable. And then you get this wild man who doesn't necessarily have those laws, but has like a kind of dignity about him, despite where he's come from. And then when these two things mix together, you get brilliant magical things. Possibly it's so that the civilizers, in inverted commas, have an excuse for going out and civilizing in inverted commas. But still, this is definitely a mythological theme.
Yeah, I would say so, because I think you're right on the money with that, of like too much of a good thing's ultimately bad for you, and you see that kind of when the powers that be see that they can take measures, it usually gets stricter, not the other way around. And then that's when you kind of too much order, too much micromanagement. And then the flip side is you have somebody who still has a noble air of sensibility, shall we say, a good sense of internal justice, may come around and be like, look, if we are nurtured in the right way, we can have internal sense of justice, and we don't need somebody constantly micromanaging us and pointing a finger. So I think that's very interesting, and that's what kind of makes me think about the whole Bacchic thing as well.
Yes, that is the theme of Dionysus, isn't it? Really, especially like I was on the Amish Inquisition the other night, and it was brought up by Phil. Yeah, and it's this thing of, it's like Conan the Barbarian, isn't it? Like there's civilization, but then it gets strict, and then this noble warrior barbarian comes in and messes it all up for you, because actually you've gotten too big for your station, and in you come, to destroy everything. But because there's a natural order to things, and there is an internal righteousness.
Yes.
Because the city cannot often subdue the individual as it does.
That's it. Your liberty and freedom. Ultimately, it's how you can. They can't take you away from you, and they can't take thoughts away from you. So it's kind of like you've still got levels of freedom. However, sometimes it needs to be externalized as well. Do you know, if you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. So the Pelasgians in your mind, so these very early people, possibly the predecessors to the Greeks, as I understand, like certainly the kind of parts of the Greek culture. Obviously, when people say Greeks or Greek, it's lots of people coming in from lots of different areas at different times. Mm-hmm. However, there's a basic culture there, isn't there? As I'm starting to understand it, some of the more mysterious parts of the culture, as in the mystery traditions, are coming from like the Pelasgians and these outside sources. You just said Dionysus. This in early Greece, it was the cult of Dionysus was an external thing and quite scary, and we didn't want that here because it made people bestial. They were taking all kinds of substances and going out raving it up essentially and doing crazy stuff. But there's a release within that wildness, within that complete letting go. There's a release and a reset, and it can be good for your soul. We know this going out at the weekend and going on a mad one.
Yep, in a controlled way.
Yeah. And it can be very revivifying, although tiring at the same time. So in early Greece, this was this was an opponent really to the state. It's making people not obey the laws and such. So I think it did, I'm not sure if I'm correct, but I think it took quite a while for that cult of Dionysus Bacchus to actually be brought in and become something of a state religion.
Yeah, I mean, there was even later times when they were trying to get rid of it, in the Roman period particular, I believe, they're trying to get rid of these practices because it's, I guess, there's always a bit of a conflict, isn't there, between, because from one side you can see how, look, you need to get this type of thing out of you. So going in a controlled environment, I don't mean controlled as in somebody's there officiating it, because it's all about freedom and liberty, but you're out of the way, you're not harming other people necessarily.
You're in an arena, an arena that's set up for you. Yeah. Like a festival.
Kind of like a festival, yeah, and that's, it's a huge thing. Everyone's going there to partake. You see it as a kind of, I mean, the talk about the mysteries as a catharsis, as in like a purification, going through it, getting it out. And like you said, it's kind of like you imagine a sine wave where you've got the middle crossing point, and there's always a swing from, positive to negative and back again. And I suppose you kind of see this duality play out over time, space, and history. You always go through times of like liberty and people breaking through the walls or the ceiling, and then it going back into some form of order. But really that middle crossings, that's the balance, isn't it?
This has been the subject of my recent thoughts. We live in fast times, and these pendulums, you put it as a sine wave, I always say pendulum swing, same thing. The pendulum swings happening faster and faster. As far as I can see, I don't know about everybody else's political persuasions. I'm quite a centrist, so I'm trying to figure out how to stop this pendulum swinging so much politically. Now, personally, I think the pendulum should actually swing quite a lot, because there are times that you've got to work hard and you've got to submerge yourself into that role of the cityling. And then there's other times where you need to go out and party and enjoy yourself and be the barbarian.
Yeah.
It's Apollonian, Dionysian, as Nietzsche would put it.
No, can completely see that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost all of the mystical traditions preach, from Buddhism to the Kabbalists to almost everybody, they say the middle path. You've got to go up that middle path. And that works. However, it's quite boring. not as boring as working hard all the time.
Yeah.
And actually, ultimately, not quite as boring as partying all the time. That gets boring as well. But I think for the personality, there's got to be that sine wave. You try and stay in the center as much as you can, but you've got to try and have that sine wave, else you're not a complete person. But for society, I'm not sure it's the best thing, because you could take left-wing politics. That's recently gone too far, and now we're swinging back right suddenly and hard.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly in the States they are. And I don't know if it's getting a bit psychotic, really. It's getting a bit bipolar,
exactly. I think that's the problem. Like what you've just described there isn't actually just a gradual swinging. It just seems to be going from one side instantly to the other, to the other, to the other. And there's not this.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Both are pushing too hard. They're not, because they're not seeing that middle path and trying to work together towards a harmony. That each side is trying to win. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think that was
too hard of a whole.
That was a very interesting way that you put it there, actually, because you can see that it's just living in the extremes, and we know, from nature that living in the extremes, you can't survive in those extremes if it's permanently one or the other. Nature goes through cycles. You got the 4 seasons. We couldn't survive if we were just going from winter instantly to midsummer, instantly back to the middle of winter. Nothing would survive. And
well, we know this just by looking at certain animals or certain plant species that specialize for those conditions. When those conditions change, you are gone, because you've got no ability to adapt to the change.
There you go. Exactly. And I think.
So go on.
Sorry, but you carry on. I've just jumped in there.
No, it's fine. I'm here to talk to you.
Okay, thanks, buddy. I've completely forgot what I was going to say now. Oh my goodness!
What I was going to say is more important anyway. So what we were talking about was barbarianism versus civilization, or having fun and being personal and being individual, or being part of the collective. And you need to be both. It's like picking between your mum and your dad. It just doesn't really work. You've got to have both. So the Pelasgians, they were more, according to the Greeks, on the barbaric side of things. Is that how you see it, or were they quite civilized if they were nomadic, or what were they?
Well, I think what's interesting is how you've just said there about community and then one ruler, because it seems to me, because the source that talks about the Pelasgians being converted to agriculturalism, they talk about communal meals. So, the community would come together and make these communal meals. So I don't know whether that's associated with agriculturalism, but what's certainly interesting about that is I was just reading a recent study that was concluded actually on genetics in the British Isles. And what they said is they found there was one village, and everybody in the village, or rather something like maybe 3/4 of them, were related to one female line. And they were talking about a matrilocal society, not a matrilineal necessarily, matrilocal, which means the women were in one area and males would come from the outside and move to them and to stay with them. And what
in Britain,
in Britain,
Wow.
So it's very interesting. But what they were saying is that this kind of community lends itself to regions where wealth is in the land itself rather than property. So that it's the land itself that's rich, and they're staying in a tight-knit community around that land, and that land's supporting them, which again makes me think of communal, like how these other agriculturalists over in the Mediterranean are having communal meals. And what's interesting about that is, on the flip side, these Yamnaya people, they seem to have kind of like a tiered system, with the elite king or tribal lord at the top, and then his lesser lords underneath. And then that ultimately keeps going down until you've got like a slave class who are just tilling the land. So, and as well, going back to different burials, I'm going to reference Britain because when I've looked at burials, that's the thing that I'm most knowledgeable on. But the earlier burials that you have in Britain before the Celtic or Beaker expansion, so the Beaker people being like an offshoot ultimately of the Yamnaya, so they're kind of associated with R1A haplogroups. Well, the people who were there before that, they were buried in long barrows, multiple people in a big burial, whereas when these Bronze Age pastoralist types come over, it's their rich and wealthy that are built in one massive barrow, or with the family, or maybe possibly sometimes the spouse, or horses and grave goods. So I keep coming up against this duality of communal, wealth in the land, people staying in a tight-knit community, and associated with matriarchal, versus nomadic pastoralist, elite sort of classes and different kind of tiers systems, and more associated with patriarchal. And however, the Pelasgians have got elements of both, because when they talk about the history of Pelasgus ultimately descends from Oceanus, and people who study it, so there's some scholars, so Beeks, who does a lot of he's done like a Proto-Indo-European dictionary and stuff. He's really into tracing the Proto-Indo-European languages and whatnot. He says that the notion of an ocean that surrounds the habitable earth, he says that's non-Proto-Indo-European. And he also says the etymology of the word is pre-Greek, so not necessarily Indo-European. So and you see elements of this in the material relating to the Pelasgians. And there was something else I was going to say about that point, actually.
About the Oceanus point.
Yeah, about Oceanus.
What's the? So you were saying that's it. Go.
Yeah, it's just come to me. And also in some of like Homer's texts, it's actually written that the gods seem to descend from Oceanus and Tethys, which is slightly different, which is different from, for argument's sake, I think it's Hesiod's cosmogony off the top of my head. I'll have to double check that. But anyways, they're saying it's slightly different here. And the speculating, is this because this is the original kind of line before the Olympian kind of system comes about later on? So I'm definitely butting heads with a bit of a duality, because of course they do have Pelasgians use, Laricians use, so that they're still, they have Zeus, but in a slightly different form. However,
well, if it's of any use, I mean, Plato, when he's talking about Atlantis, which is obviously talking about old times, and there's lots of encodings in there, but he states that Oceanus, who is Poseidon, pretty much, there's an interplay there, and that Poseidon comes first. He's talking about Atlantis with Poseidon, because it's so old that Jupiter came later, and they know from history that that Jupiter and Poseidon were essentially the same character, and there was some splitting off. Yep. Now I think that's when people have moved inland. So obviously you got Oceanus if you're near the sea, but then when you come inland a bit, the sky's the thing that's producing the water. The sky's the thing that's producing the fertility. So that tends to come in later as people go further away from the water.
I've actually got you've just jogged my memory, actually, and it was referring to Beeks earlier. What he was actually saying is Poseidon does seem to be Proto-Indo-European, but he says it seems to have originally been associated with water from springs, and it's to do with the earth shaker, what's below the ground and producing this spring of water. And he actually says something to do with the Proto-Indo-Europeans not having much knowledge of the sea at that point, because they live further inland rather than coastal people who inhabit the coast. And this kind of goes into Larissa, actually, and this is why I think it's the meeting these people who live in the fertile plains, because a lot of the settlements They seem to be located around areas that have a lot of irrigation, almost where the rivers and everything are coming to meet the sea, because you get alluvial deposits when the rivers hit the sea, which yields really fertile soil. So they specifically mention that they inhabit the fertile plains, the places near rivers. And again, this brings me back to there's a guy from, I think it's Minnesota University, and he's called Dr. Reves, and he's done a study looking at topographical names, river names and mountain names, and he attributes them to two different types of people, one that followed the waterways and others, and that inhabited the plains by the rivers, and then others that were like lived in the highlands and stuff. And that's also, I think that could tie into the difference between pastoralism and people, agriculturalists as well. So I keep coming up against this duality of these two things. So I keep saying it. So sorry if I'm just repeating myself here, but I'm just trying to say I keep coming up across these.
Life is that, and I think one of the problems is that sometimes we want it to be one or the other.
Yeah.
And very often it's not. It's both. It's as simple as answer as that.
That's it. I agree. And cultures change over time. Do you know what I mean? They're not staying the same, coming into contact with different peoples under different circumstances. And ultimately you have not just a transference of language, culture, ideas, but also genetics as well. So yeah, I'm leaning towards them personally being an early offshoot of the Yamnayas, or people associated with that, coming into contact with these agriculturalists, and basically they're forming a hybrid society with elements of both. And they seem to be quite intelligent as well from some of the sources, because they say that they moved into this region that was a fertile plain, but the rivers, when it flooded, it would carry off a big portion of this fertile soil, and they managed to basically terraform it with embankments to stop that from happening. And they're also associated with making soil around Athens fertile. There was a bit of bad land and they wanted to settle there, and the Athenians were like, yeah, you can have that land. And then apparently they made it that good and that fertile that they then got rid of them and said, you're gonna have to go now, we want that land. So yeah, terraforming and really propagating this land, it's really fascinating.
Well, if places like Sumeria and all those kind of places were where all these techniques and cultures have come from originally, the original city version of all this stuff, they are absolutely obsessed with making the land fertile and irrigation. Even we see the tree of life, that one of their main symbols. There's an internal, there's lots of analogies going on here, but one of them, how it's presented on the surface, is there's an internal tree that they're growing, and then irrigation systems all around it. It looks like vines or ivy or something like that, but in the books, it's an irrigation system. So this kind of technique and this stuff's been going on for a long time, because the world is barely inhabitable. There are only certain areas that as humans we can go to, or we take animals to places where they can live and we can live off the animals, i.e. the mountains and such places.
No, yeah. It's very interesting how you see just the adaptability factor. It blows my mind. Even selective breeding animals and crops and stuff to suit your environment. It's very interesting. And I think, looking at these two groups of people coming together, you can certainly see how using agriculture and animal husbandry coming together would kind of push a culture forward, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Especially if you can stop the nomadism to some extent and come together. But again, you was mentioning it before, it's this patriarchal matrilineal kind of thing, and just trying to get over that modality and bind each other together. There's got to be some pretty strong cultural elements for that to happen. Although we've not really got to a warring period yet, have we? Are people around these areas particularly warlike? I'm sure there's tribal wars and such, but there's no mass invasions or anything.
There's a mention of Hippothous, who's a Pelasgian, and some of the texts actually say he's a descendant of either Larissa or Pelasgus, or potentially both. And he's fighting in the Trojan War, and it says Pelasgus and his brother, who were known to rage with the spear. So they seem quite renowned for the spear work.
Right. So
definitely,
absolutely warlike then. So that's really cool. That's changed things a little bit for me, because I often forget how old the Trojan War is, because you always, from watching popular media and such, you get the impression that it's, ancient Greece, and it's not ancient Greece at all. It's really ancient,
ancient.
It's really ancient. Yeah. So ancient, they didn't believe it was true.
Yeah, that's it. They just thought it was a complete myth. And, but it just goes to show over time, we find out more and more as time goes on. And I think it's very interesting, the Pelasgians obviously being around in this kind of, Mycenaean period, even before, potentially, what I mean? And I just find it super interesting, really, that for me, the oldest kind of time periods are the most interesting for me, definitely. And
so what kind of things were these guys up to then? What were the festivities like? What were the gods like? Do we know much about that? Obviously, a lot of it's going to be from certain authors talking about these people. Did they have? So we've already said they have writing. Did they have any scraps of writing that we've got on anything, or pottery or anything like that?
No, as far as I'm aware, there's not anything that's been found where they've identified, this must be Pelasgian letters. I think mainstream academia just goes with the fact that Cadmus, that the ultimately Phoenician Cadmus brought them first. But to me, they're all extremely similar. Could they not have come from a common origin? Do you know what I mean? Do we know for a fact that the Phoenician originally, and that it's not come from a common origin elsewhere? I'm just asking that question because, as far as I'm aware, I mean, I haven't seen any information. I'm just asking a question, just putting it out there. So how can we tell if for sure that's where it originated? We've got Diodorus saying one thing. We also have other sources saying that the Pelasgians first took those letters to Etruria. In the Loeb editor of Diodorus, who actually writes that statement, there's a little editor's note, and he says, when the palace of Cadmus was excavated, he said the letters were found, but they weren't Semitic in origin. So that was actually written by the editor underneath that quote, that they were Pelasgian in origin. So does that completely disprove it? I don't know. The palace of Cadmus could have had Greek on it as well. Who knows?
Yeah. Was it right in remembering, as with the Phoenicians, which means kind of red or purple? Pelasgian meant something similar, or is that me getting confused?
So I believe that it's still up for debate what the etymology of Pelasgian is. However, I'm wondering if there's a connection to Pelagos, because there's a lot of words with that are related to water, and even in Latin, Pelagus, it means the sea. So I'm wondering if there is some kind of etymology to do with the sea, because a lot of them they seem to be on many islands in the Aegean as well. They seem to be surrounded by water, where they're inhabiting these fertile plains. So it keeps coming up, these Pel words related to the Pelasgians. So I'm asking the question, is there a connection to water or the sea with that? But as far as academia goes, it's still debated. Some people connect them to the Pelaset, the sea people. I've seen that connection be thrown around a lot, but ultimately, I believe the linguists, they're not quite sure.
Well, I mean, the Phoenicians were known for their navigational abilities on the sea. So
yeah, And interestingly enough, there is a navigation device called a Pelorus, which is has that Pel routing as well. And let me just, I've got some info on it here. Just let me find it. So it's basically like you've got sightings, and you can sight certain stars, and it's quite rudimentary. However, one of the stars, they use basically a lot of the star signs that are pretty important for navigation, you know, like the Pleiades, Orion, Arctus and stuff like that. But they say what the main, when you look at the information on this Pelorus, it says, oh, it was named after Hannibal's navigator, chief navigator, apparently. But then that struck me. I thought, well, that's pretty late on. I've seen,
it's too late.
Yeah, I've seen that word crop up well before. So I looked in a dictionary of Greek and Roman language, and they even comment. They just say it's unusual that they note this is the origin of it, because that completely ignores that that word's been used and was known to Greeks way before that time. And then the site, there's a promontory in Sicily called the Pelorus, I believe. And, you know, it was an important naval base, Greek naval base in later times. So there's definitely some connection going on there. And as well, of course, the Pleiades, they can also be called Pleiades. So it's spelled P-E-L-E-I-A-D-E-S. Palladius. Sorry, I'm pronouncing that completely wrong.
It's difficult enough to spell the original way.
Yeah. I know sometimes like my my blooming dyslexia like proper kicks in, and I see the words swap around and it's just like a mouthful.
Oh no, mate. I don't suffer from that, but I almost every time spell Pleiades wrong, and I better write it 3 times a week.
Yeah.
That and Sagittarius. Has it got 2 G's or 2 T's? I still can't remember. I spelled it wrong last night.
I am a Sagittarius, right? And I couldn't spell it for you. Yeah.
No.
But this is what it says about a Pelorus. So it's spelled P-E-L-O-R-U-S, and obviously we have Pleiades, which is the alternative spelling of Pleiades. So it says, in marine navigation, a Pelorus is a reference tool for maintaining bearing of a vessel at sea. It is a simplified compass without a directive element, suitably mounted and provided with vanes to permit observation of relative bearings. And then it says here, the instrument was named for one Pelorus, said to have been the pilot for Hannibal circa 203 AD. And apparently the Polynesians use a type of Pelorus to navigate now. Now, some of the star signs they use for this Pelorus are Polaris, Ursa Minor, Ursa Major, Arcturus, the Pleiades, Orion's Belt, Sirius, Antares, Southern Cross. So, you know, they're all these major star signs.
They're the brighter, they're the ones that you can see, basically.
Yeah. So to me, it implies that this is an early form of sea navigation. And then from the Roman and Greek geography, Dictionary of Roman Greek Geography, this is what William Smith says. So he says, Pelorus, a celebrated promontory in Sicily, forming the northeast extremity of the whole island. And then he goes on to say, he says, a strange story is told by some Roman writers that it derives its name from the pilot of Hannibal, who was put to death by the general from a suspicion of treachery, thus overlooking the fact that it was well known by that name to the Greeks for centuries before the time of Hannibal. And it was also known as Mons Neptunus, because there's a mountain range right on this promontory called Mons Neptunus. So I'm wondering if that's why there's this Pel route. You've got the Neptune Mountains. It's right next to the sea. It was a naval base and stuff. But certainly this Pelorus, the name of this navigational device, it shares a name with this promontory in Sicily as well.
Oh. it just shows you how difficult it is to do the research, but how fascinating it can be at the same time, because you're never quite arriving at an answer. And
Yeah,
maybe 6 answers in 6 of the locations will make you go, "Oh no, yeah, we do actually know this." You know, you'll find it in the most obscure places and at strange angles to the thing that you're studying in the first place. This is
it
what
is. It's
makes it
like
a
the Hydra's
lifelong.
head, isn't it? You chop one head
Yeah,
off, and several more grow in its stead. That's what it's like with looking into these questions. You just
yeah.
come up with more. Just come up
So
with more.
here's a good question for you. First of all, why Old Boy, and why is it spelt like that?
You know what? It was it was originally going to be a stage name, for
What were
music,
you?
because I'm a musician, and
All
I
right.
wanted something that where I'm from, you call your dad your old boy, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted just a name that that sounded just like a thing rather than you know a silly band name that meant nothing. I just wanted something that was just me, and I liked the way that it's also it just has a bit of a reference to um, the Celtic heritage as well, which was an element in my music. So it was just a hybrid kind of idea of old boy, and then spell it that way, just to as a little nod, towards that heritage without
Mm-hmm.
being explicitly that way. And then and then I started the YouTube channel, and I couldn't come up with another name, and I thought, oh well, old boy, let's just use that.
Mate, you know what? Mine's exactly the same story.
Is it?
I used to. I was a music producer and a rapper, and that's my old. That's my old handle.
Right. Right. That's crazy then.
Yeah,
That's crazy. We both got a similar kind of background
yeah.
for our
Origin
names.
story.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good name. I like it. I like it.
So tracing this Hydra's head back, we've now found the tail and why you called Old Boy, but why the body? What attracted you to this study? Was it looking at your own heritage, and then you've suddenly, you've gone down these paths until you've arrived at currently the Pelasgians. I'm sure you'll be into something else later. But
Yeah, I'm
is
just sorry, just finish what you were saying, but I just jumped in again
I
there.
finished, dude?
All right, okay. So I just got interested in obviously growing up with around with a lot of history around. So strange story. I was actually raised by my grandparents, and
Mhm.
they raised me in an old medieval mill, and it was originally a corn mill for the local lord, and his castle was actually on the other side of a field that the mill was in. And they bought it. It was just like a complete ruin. It was a shell of a structure, and they completely renovated it to make it, a home. And I was raised in this mill, so I'm living in this
Cool.
medieval mill in the middle of this field, staring at this derelict castle. And every day, we would always be out in nature, walking around. And there's a lot of history in the area. There's Roman history, there's ancient Celtic history. Then you've got the history of the Saxon history there, Norman history there, Viking history there. So I'm
Mm.
growing up with all this history around me, and it's always been in the back of my mind. And but I always just had a passing interest in it. And it wasn't actually until lockdown time, when I found myself with extra time on my hands. I had a martial arts gym at the time that basically shut down because of that. I was unable to continue with my
What were you
pursuit of
practicing?
martial arts. And that then got me onto, when I had this time on my hands, looking into history. And then I started getting interested
Can I
into,
hold you that? I want to
yeah,
hold
yeah,
you that for 1 second. What were you
yeah.
studying? What martial art were you studying?
I was, I had a Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym. So that's
Cool.
what I was doing at the time. So I'm
I
still,
too. I'm a martial artist.
yeah,
So I used to. Have you?
I think I've seen you talk
Well,
about it before on other shows, about like
I'm
Tai
always
Chi and
talking
stuff
about
as
it.
well. Yeah, no, it's wicked.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I love
what
them, mate. It's my main thing in life. These days, I teach my own kind of thing. It's strange, and being the esoteric type, I've
yeah,
picked up lots of things from lots of different martial arts. I used to do jujitsu as a kid. Moved through like Muay Thai,
yeah,
bit of karate, a bit of other things. Ended up studying ninjutsu, might have a bad rep, but people don't understand it. I did understand it, and it's effing amazing. But then I saw, as with most of those old traditional martial arts, there are holes in it, especially in the way that people train. So I was like, you know what, I've done this since I was 12. I'm 45 now. So it was like about 5 years ago, it was time to take everything that I'd learned in all these different martial arts and then take them on tour. So I was just turning up at different dojos and learning things and passing things on and picking things up. And then I just arrived, like, I've kind of got my own system now.
Good.
Which, yeah.
I think but that's 100% what you need to do, is because not everything works for everyone. So, we've all got different body types. We've all got different strengths and weaknesses. So I think, it's good to supplement what a certain martial art doesn't do for you with something else 100%. And if you want to be an all well-rounded martial artist, you're ultimately going to have to do that anyway. Because I've had a bit of a similar story. So my mum and dad, they've got a martial arts gym. They've still got it now. And I grew up around that. And I was doing karate, when I was like 6, 7 and all that. I went through the karate ranks. And then I also had some friends who were doing Kung Fu, and I got friends with a guy who taught the Kung Fu, and I was doing bits of that as well. And then MMA started becoming a thing, and my dad started doing MMA classes at the gym. And so I got right into that. And this was when I was like 18, 19. And I think I had around about eight MMA fights over my whole career. So probably from 18 to like 24. And then I left to go to university, and I did nothing, nothing, didn't exercise, didn't do anything. I was just doing the uni thing, going out, drinking too much, eating just junk. And then this is going to sound like really, really vain, but one day I was just like getting changed in front of the mirror, and I was like, oh my God, what has happened?
Happened to me.
Like, what's happened here? And then I thought, right, I need to pack all that in. I need to get back to the gym. So I actually just started doing weights for a time, and I was pushing, getting certain lifts, and I did that for about 2 years. And then I got to the point, and I was like, well, I got my lifts, and that was my target for so long. And then it didn't actually do anything for me when I hit it. I'm like, what's next? Like, where do you go from here? And I already felt like I was maxing my body out, trying to get, whatever deadlift. And I realized what I missed is the element of the element of competition, and also the element of
camaraderie,
what martial arts does for you mentally as well.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm still doing jiu-jitsu now, not because I'm in that honeymoon phase that I was years ago, because that's what I did. I went into jiu-jitsu after that weight training thing, and it was like, yeah, I'm just 100% all about this. And I'll be honest, after the lockdown stuff, I didn't know if I was going to go back to it, and I managed to get myself back, and I still don't enjoy it and kind of buzz over it as much as I did, but I still do it because it's good for me as a person, because I learn to be a better person, because when I was,
because you get your ass kicked every time.
you get humbled as soon as you start thinking, oh, I'm good at this. Somebody comes along and just dominates you, and you're like, oh well, I guess today is not my day, and you have to go home. Or there's somebody in the gym, you can tap them out every single time, but they're getting better and better and better, and then one day they get you, and then you're driving home in the car having a long conversation with yourself. And there's two things you can do. You can either get upset about it, and you'll probably quit jiu-jitsu, or you swallow it and go, well, you know what, I'm going to use that to get better. And then you go back and you've learned something about yourself then. Do you know what I mean? That you don't get anywhere else.
It's an instant arena where the decisions that you make, you get the results delivered at that time. And because it's a manly art, it's all about pride and about strength and about power and all these other things. It's like that Dionysian arena we were talking about before. It's a place where you can do this thing safely, mostly safely. But it's something I find in general, martial arts, as somebody that studies without it's difficult to put a word in it that doesn't sound silly. So I just call it magic, even though that's the silliest thing. It's like these old magical philosophies, you know, fire, water, air, and earth. Where'd you see that? Well, you see that loads of times in loads of places in the martial arts, you know, especially in kung fu and things like that. It's in ninjutsu, but
like
it's
the Korean
every
flag as
time.
well, isn't it?
Yeah, oh yes, it's everywhere. It's, mate, the reason why I actually, the way that I teach, I do it from that same system. The same system that's in the tarot, it's in loads of places. Let's put it like this. If I'm showing somebody a technique, somebody's going to have to be fire, somebody's going to have to be water. What does that mean? Well, somebody's going to have to be active, someone's going to have to be receptive. So you've got the person doing the attack and the person receiving the attack to do something else to it. And it might be a fiery technique, which is straight lines, lots of power. It might be a water technique, which is kind of like locking and pulling back and submerging them. It might be an air technique, which is very swordy, very throwy, very kind of light and twisty. Or it might be an earth technique where you've got no idea what's going on. You're halfway through getting punched, you're falling backwards, you're pulling in with you don't know what's going to happen. The Earth's got this revolutionary cyclic thing about it. So I find it a perfect area to teach how to fight, but also to teach these metaphysical arts that I've picked up from studying all these metaphysical arts.
You know, you've made a really good point there, because what I realized early on is I had to adapt a certain style to suit my body type, because I'm not like a big guy. I'm like, you know, 5'10", 70 kg, which is like, is that like 11 stone or something?
Mate, so you're exactly the same height and weight as me. Yeah.
There we go. I know lots of similarities there with our names and stuff as well, and martial arts. That's well interesting. But I'm the smallest guy essentially in the room. And, you know, I went to a wrestling coach, and he was a small guy. He was shorter than me, but a bit stockier. And he was a Commonwealth Games medalist. And I went to him because I thought, this smaller guy, he's going to know his technique is going to be, brilliant, because day in, day out, he's going to be the smallest guy in that gym, which means if he's a Commonwealth Games medalist, his technique's amazing. But two, he'll also be able to show me the small guy tricks. And he said to me, he was like, when you're wrestling, he was like, you're not going to go head to head with somebody. He was like, because they're going to beat you every single time. So it's all about techniques getting onto the outside. So, you know, doing a low outside single where I'm attaching myself, my left arm's attaching myself to their left leg. I'm swinging round to swap arms, so I'm ultimately behind them and to the side, out of the way of the strength and the weight. And all techniques like that. Or in jiu-jitsu, I want to be underneath them. I don't want to be on top of them, because they're going to bench press me. But if I get underneath the center of gravity and I can roll them, you know, techniques like that, which I don't know if that you would class that as like a water technique style.
Very water.
The higher strength, the straight lines, the brute kind of force. I'm trying to
Water's like submerging and coming under and rolling back and then rolling forward again like a wave, or just locking the fuckers up so they not get anything. I've been studying Tai Chi recently because I've pretty much done everything else, and you know, if I always had that love, I never really lost that love for martial arts. There were times where I weren't doing it, and I was 25 when I looked in that mirror and I had tits and a bit of a belly. I took a photo. I wrote like "not good enough" on because I was drunk. Not good enough, like that. It was my birthday, and took a photo of it in the mirror with me looking not very happy. And then went to bed and woke up and saw that photo. And was like, oh my god, no, because you can't always see yourself, can you?
No,
do you know what I mean?
That's it. Like, so, same thing for me. I didn't notice for ages. It just crept up on me.
Yeah, and I wasn't that bad, but it just was saggy and weird, and wasn't me. I wasn't the me that I had in my head. But anyway, so I've been learning Tai Chi recently, which wants you to be saggy boob man. They don't really want you working out or anything like that, because it's a different way of moving and fighting. I mean, I don't really rate it as a fighting art, but some of the ideas and skills and some of the more unbelievable stuff is really, really interesting, and I'm starting to wrap my head around it. What I would have thought was amongst the unbelievable stuffs a year ago when I first started, I've discovered isn't quite so unbelievable. But that's the same with all martial arts, don't you think? A lot of people go, "Oh, it's rubbish that," and it's like, no, you just don't understand everything that's going on.
It's about the application as well, isn't it? You know, you don't go, that tool's rubbish. Well, what's it rubbish for? What you're using the tool for? You know what I mean? But everything's got its correct application.
It's that internet comment. It always makes me laugh. You'll see a martial arts post, a guy showing you how to do a technique. You're like, "Oh, it's pretty cool," and you see underneath it, "Yeah, but that wouldn't work for this. That wouldn't work for that." It's like, well, of course it doesn't. That's why there's a whole art. You know what I mean? Yeah, but what if he punch you in the side of the head? But that's not what he's doing. It's like,
you get that in jiu-jitsu as well. There's like a kind of like a character that everyone says every gym's got this character, and you'll be demonstrating a move for a particular application, and someone goes, "Yeah, but what if they did that?" And you're like, "Well, you could say that literally about anything."
Anything.
You know what I mean? Say, what if a lion just came in here now and just ate us?
Do you know what I mean? What if you had a gun? It's like, we're in a fucking dojo.
Yeah. So you're just like, well, if you did that,
it's the amateur's question.
Yeah.
It's these same people watch Ip Man and believe every single minute of that film. You know what I mean? It is funny.
Yeah,
so,
it is. But going back to what you just said about, you know, putting weight on and stuff, I saw an interesting source. I think it could have been Strabo, and he says that the in the land of Celtica, the Celts says they have this girdle, like a belt, and if somebody gets too fat for the belt, they get punished and shamed.
Cool. Yeah.
So they're going around going,
Bring
put that
back
on, right, and then they're like, "Come on, blow my neck, Mike. You need to get on a diet there, mate." You know what I mean? So,
well, I mean, even having the girdle on, can you imagine how uncomfortable that would be? And you know, whenever I've put weight on since, it's always like when I'm leaning forward, it's like, oh, it's uncomfortable. How do actually big people go on? Does it not feel horrible? That I don't like it. I mean, do what you want, guys. It's your body, your choice.
Hey, I've been like, I was like a really heavy kid, me. Like I was, I was looking at me now, you know, I said I'm like 5'10", 11 stone. I've been 14 and a half stone in my life before. Wow. Not just all fat. This is when I was doing like lots of lifting and stuff. But then as a young kid, when I was like 11, 12, 13, I was, you know, quite a heavy lad.
Quite a chubby kid.
Yeah.
I've probably hit about 13 stone with muscle.
Yeah.
But I hover, I mean, like, I'm 5'11", but isn't it funny, before you said like, oh yeah, I'm 5'10", I'm like the smallest guy in there. There's a lot of Viking blood around where you live. There's a lot around where I'm from as well.
Yeah.
But there isn't where I'm currently living. And suddenly I'm really tall around here.
Brilliant. Can I move near you?
Oh, mate, you don't want to. It's dull.
Is it?
No, it's good fun, actually. I live in Preston. It is. I chose to live here. It's got some really nice, cool parts. The park's wicked, and some good places to go out, and some cool people.
I used to go to Preston a fair bit when I lived in Cumbria. You know, if there was like gigs on, you go into like 53 degrees and that. I've like been in there a good few times. And one of my mates actually used to go to uni in Preston, so we used to stay at his house quite a bit when he was there. Yeah, I liked it. It got some good hazy memories of Preston.
Yeah, that's how it was for me.
Yeah.
Then I moved. I had an accident, and I moved to Wales for a bit. I moved to Cubby Island, like pretty much as far west as you can go. That's where I got into a lot of this stuff. I made a lot of discoveries there, including that pattern that I found.
Nice.
Yeah, and just the whole history of the island's very mythological. There are these two priests, one called Cubby, and the other one I can't remember. And they'd walk from one side of the island. One guy'd walk from his side of the island to the other side of the island to do his ministry, and the other guy do the opposite. One was called the Yellow-Faced, and the other one was called the Yellow-Necked. I'm like, what's going on here?
Facing the sun or
walking away from the sun.
Yeah.
But I'm like, there's just one day I'm walking through the town centre. I actually lived there because plug your ears, internet. I was enjoying the company of a woman in the bath, if you know what I'm saying. And there was a glass of gin on the side, and my Achilles tendon came down onto the glass and slit my Achilles tendon. Yeah.
Ow.
And I didn't walk for a year. So I stayed at her house. That's where she lived. I'd met her at a festival.
Jeez,
So yeah,
man.
stayed with her.
That's a savage
it was
injury,
horrible.
that, mate.
It was, honestly, mate. Just thinking about it, it's go,
Oh.
oh, no, don't do that.
Yeah,
But
it's making my Achilles.
Sorry, mate.
I was just saying it's making my Achilles cringe. Like,
yeah, it's weird. I think it's because your body knows that is the strongest tendon in your whole body, but also the most vulnerable. That's why it's like this mythological Achilles tendon injury. Do you know what I mean? But it did a lot for me. It changed my life. You know, apart from a trip that I had around that time, it put me in one place for long enough to do a lot of these studies and to find out a lot of the stuff. So anyway, as I was saying, I just started walking again. I was walking through the town, the port town, and there was an image. I was thinking to myself, I wonder if one's the sun and one's the moon, yellow face, yellow necked, you know, like a neck's partial, like the moon crescent. And then I turned around and there were these two plaques, mosaics on the wall. One was Cubby and one was this other guy whose name I forgot. And one had the sun behind him and the other had the moon behind him. I'm like, I'm getting this. And then when I'm walking around the rest of the town, which is an old Roman fort, one of the last places where they went to go and find all the druids. I also noticed there were no oak trees. Yeah, Anglesey. There were no oak trees there. I'm trying to make an acorn wine, an acorn whiskey. And no oak trees. And I'm like, why? And I looked it up. I'm like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
They chopped all the trees down.
Yeah.
So at that week, I'm sure I'd discovered this weird pattern in the tarot that I realized went over Stonehenge and the pyramids. And so I put it over a photo I took of these two guys, and it was exactly it fit over it exactly. And then I'm noticing how many Masonic symbols are all around the town. It's like a proper Mason town. There's some knowledge around there. Yeah, that's the end of my story.
where I'm at now is quite heavily, Masonic. In fact, there's a guy it was in like the late 1800s, and his statues in the local garden, and you read his credentials. He's like Grand Master of the Freemasons, Viceroy, of Parliament. He's like envoy to India and stuff, and he's got all these like titles.
Wow.
And he established, or rather his family established, Freemasonry in the town. And then you look at the family and stuff, and I mean, they've got some amazing buildings. One of them's got a water garden. It's got it's got a half moon pond, a full moon pond. It's got statues of Bacchus, Aphrodite, Poseidon, Hercules, and everything.
Did you ever actually try out any of these mystery rites? You know what I'm saying?
No.
I don't mean like, did you turn up somewhere bollock naked and chanting? I mean, like, have you tried potions, ayahuasca, and such?
Yeah.
You don't need to be that careful, but
okay. I was just thinking, I'm like, I went to a country where it was legal to make DMT.
What, Liverpool?
Yeah. I extracted it from a plant root. Mimosa hostilis.
What was it? Yeah, Mimosa hostilis.
Yeah.
When I also went to a different country, that's what I did. I can't remember what country it was. Wigan.
I can't either. Wigan's its own country, is it?
Mate, my family's actually from Wigan, so I can say what I want about the place.
I'll let you do that. I don't want any angry Wigan people getting angry at me, so I'll leave you to say that. I can say what
Wiganers will not be watching this.
That's all right. So did you do? Sorry, everyone. I hope I didn't offend anybody. But did you use the acid-base reduction method?
What did I do? I used a non-polaric solvent. Is what I used. Yeah,
like lighter fluid or something.
naphtha or something like that.
Yeah.
So you did the same?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe
the only trouble is, though, you don't have any scientific equipment to be able to test how lethal or not lethal it is.
I kind of was gauging it by the colour. So I believe the darker it is, the more impurities are present.
Yeah. It goes like a yellow, smingy, browny colour, doesn't it? The more amber it gets. Yeah.
The first batch that was made abroad in a country where it's legal to do so, it was a bit brown and tarry. So I did another pass with it.
Oh yeah, you can just put it through again, can't you? Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried going to somewhere like Holland or a hilly place in a different country and picking mushrooms?
Yes, I have. I've tried truffles in Amsterdam.
Me too.
And I've also, in a similar region, had golden teachers.
All right.
Which were
cool.
that was a good experience, actually.
I found those sclerotia, the little nuggets. What they call you called them the right name. What did you call them?
Truffles.
Truffles. That is what they are, though, isn't it? They are truffles. Yeah, the sclerotia is the scientific term. But basically some species of mushroom, of psilocybin mushroom, as with other mushrooms, they grow a little nugget under the ground, filled with all the nutrients it needs to get for the mycelium to get through the winter. And you can eat those because they have a certain amount of, these DMT derivatives in there. But they taste funny. And you can get them legally in Amsterdam. And I was like, I mean, mushrooms are weird enough tasting, but those are like,
it's horrible,
like
isn't
it? Yeah.
Horrible.
And I remember I'd never had it before. And I wasn't expecting much because everyone downplays them. And I just remember I was there with my friend. I went to the toilet. I came back and everything had changed. I never really started tripping or anything, but it was a strong experience.
It's brilliant. It's just because I had basically the same experience. So my friend had been before, and he just went, best thing to do is just get them all out of the way. And he had the tub like that, and he just scooped out a handful and just went, and just chewed them all. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know how you've just done that. I had a little bit, and like you said, the taste was horrendous. So I was just snapping little pieces off and swallowing it whole. And it took ages, but I was doing that. But same thing once it starts, happening, there's movement, like the carpet was like swimming, patterns on the wallpaper was swimming. I would be seeing these crazy kind of geometric shapes. But then I would realize that my eyes were closed. But I didn't know that my eyes had closed. Just all of a sudden, I was like, "Oh, you're actually basically asleep now." But my body hadn't realised I'd like kind of closed my eyes. It was, and I can specifically remember I was sat next to a door, and I was there going, "What's in that? People just keep coming in and out of there. Can we move away from the toilets?" My friends were like, "It's not the toilets," and I was like, "I'm sick of it." And I went over and I opened it. It was just a cupboard. And there was like nobody in there. It was just storage cupboard, but I'd seen people coming in and out of it.
How old were you?
Got to be mid-20s.
Yeah, that's the time. Me too. Yeah, that's going to be the time to do that. I mean, I've not been to other countries. I've been to my local hills on the Pennines there, and gone and picked psilocybe semilanceata, the old Liberty Caps.
Oh yes,
and had deep mystical experiences from them. You tend to find the wild ones, the ones actually out in nature, are somehow more mystical, more profound, will take you deeper. And for me, it's not being somewhere with your mate, it's sat in front of a cupboard. Do you know what I mean? It's like, go home, darken everything, some really tonal music, if not a kind of a tone, that you get on YouTube, those sleep tones or whatever. Close your eyes, wait for the panic to stop, because there's always like this wave of anxiety when you've had a slightly larger dose. Don't have a lot, but starve yourself beforehand, and that will take you deep. I have been in some profound places. Don't do it often. Do it.
Yeah.
I do a deep one once every couple of years, but certainly a bit of a deep one once a year when the season's ripened, the little bastards.
Yep.
But yeah, I recommend it wholeheartedly. I didn't manage to get them last year because I had effing COVID. It was a dodgy season. and then I had COVID, and by the time they'd been out, they'd gone, and I didn't get more than like a couple of handfuls.
Missed the window of opportunity due to illness.
Yeah.
It's never good. As a musician, do you ever feel like it makes the music, like you're more in tune with the music?
I don't know with mushrooms. So I've never actually, because I don't really play an instrument. I mean, I write music and I produce it and I make it, but it tends to be digital. When I'm doing anything as an individual musician, I'm rapping. So I can't really be on loads of drugs and rap because your mouth won't work.
Yeah.
So,
I get that.
You know, you get a bum note, that's one thing. But what do you play? I take it you're a guitar player or drummer?
I actually started off. This is just because I was raised by my grandparents, but I was doing classical piano like when I was like 7, 8, 9. I got up to grade 5 doing classical piano, and then I was about 13 by then. And I can specifically remember at lunchtime, this kid had an electric guitar, right? And at lunchtime he was playing it, and everyone was like, "Oh, this is mint!" And I was like, "Oh, this kid was like so cool," and I was like, "I want to be able to do that." And I literally begged my grandparents to get me like this little secondhand, just a little practice amp and an electric guitar. And I just taught myself how to play it. And I can read music, but with the guitar, I just completely did it by ear. And I learned. And now one of my friends, he's like grade 8 guitar and he's absolutely crazy. And we go over and jam. Now, this going back to that duality of ultimately ordered and ultimately wild, he's like ultimately ordered. He's like, right, I'm just going to play an E major 7 like arpeggio and then a scale over those chords. Let's see if that fits. And I'm like, I don't even know what you've just said. But
I tell you what, I can listen.
Yeah. Well, that's it. When we swap, because sometimes I'll play a rhythm and he'll like try and get something over the top of it. Then he'll play a rhythm and I'll play over the top of it. He'll play a rhythm and he's like, how are you just doing that? Like, what scale are you doing there? And I'm like, I've no idea. I'm just like going with what sounds good. And it's nuts how we're like two sides of a musical coin.
Yeah.
He's fully classical and he knows all of the terminology and he knows like which scales go with which chords. I know none of that, but when we have some great jams though, you know what I mean?
It's kind of like the heart and the brain dichotomy. Same as with the civilization and the wild man. Like, they can get in the way of each other. Sometimes you do need to play civilized and be able to know, you might turn up with a jazz band or something like that and they go, oh, we're playing E minor, we're going to play 7 to 8, whatever it is, some weird rhythms. And you're like, okay, I can do that because I know the language. But again, that can be stifling and you can be too rigid to it because you have the idea of what that is. That is a thing, and you set it up. Like simple things like most people don't know, but I mean, I know this as a producer. As far as bass goes, you think it would need to be in harmony with everything else. It doesn't. There's such a gap between the mids and the treble that most of the time you can play whatever bass you want in whatever notes that you want to, and it sounds right as long as it's in rhythm. It's a strange phenomenon, but you'd only know that if you went outside the rules. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like a happy accident. You know what I mean? I think there's something to be said for, like you've said, it's good to have a bit of a rigid kind of outlook, but sometimes it can leave you blinkered to things that lie outside of that, and there's less experimentation. And this is what I was saying about with the mushrooms and music. So I remember my friend Vince, actually, one of my good friends, he's really musical. And it was, he's a good guy. And it's when we did doing some music and some golden teachers and stuff. And he put some Tool on. Like now Tool, like they've got these insane polyrhythms, which like, if you're just used to 4/4 timing and stuff, you're waiting for it to conclude at a place where you expect it to, but then like it still will go on for half a bar or something, and it's completely bonkers. A prime example of a polyrhythm is Nine Inch Nails' March of the Pigs. That's got like a polyrhythm. When you listen to it, it sounds weird the first time you hear it. But anyways, we had these drums out, and me and him just put a Tool album on, and I think we just played drums to it for about 2 hours. But you know, your eyes are closed. You just feel like you're right into the music. Do you know what I mean? And it wasn't
follow it, can you?
Yeah, it was. That was a profound moment for me.
A lot of the time, Trent Reznor is using those kind of rhythms that I teach, like the Fibonacci stuff, and a lot. He uses like a lot of Fibonacci. What's that album called? Where the album covers a guy on the front. You can see his muscles, and you kind of pull him apart, and you see further into his spiritual body, as it were. Do you remember that one?
I'm not sure now. I'm not sure actually. Oh. The Fragile's got quite a lot of, you know, decay on it. Oh man, I'm trying to think.
Tool, Lateralis.
Or Tool. Sorry, I was thinking Nine Inch Nails. Yeah, I get you.
Oh, sorry, yeah, because I just said Trent Reznor, and yeah, Lateralis. So, I did the jump there. My fault. But yeah, that's right. I love that. If you see the album cover to that, anybody out there, it's like layers of transparencies, and as you pull apart these layers, it looks like, what's the artist called? Whatever his name is, Alex something.
I can't remember at all. Like, my short-term memory is just awful at the minute. I don't know why. But
I don't know why either.
Yeah.
No, that's me. I'm not putting that on anybody else. I've quit, actually. I've quit the old green.
What is it?
Of course, I only smoked it in a different country where it was legal.
Of course. As any respected partaker
would do, yeah. Cool.
No, I just think music, I think it's quite trance-inducing anyway, but then when I think you add that next level, I think you kind of link into something else. Do you know what I mean? Yes. It's almost like you get in tune with whatever it is that the music is doing. Because, you know, the Pythagoreans had some interesting concepts about music, and it blows my mind actually when you go and you read what they were saying about music and how they figured out notes and the octave and stuff. It's bonkers to think that somebody sat there and figured that stuff out, especially back then.
I actually think it's older. I'm writing a chapter on all that stuff right now about the tetractys and the way you get all the different musical notations out of it.
Yep.
It seems to be much older. I think these are systems that have come about, and he's learned on his travels, and he's kind of put them together. If indeed there is a Pythagoras, it might be like a Hermes Trismegistus kind of character, where people are associating all this kind of knowledge with this kind of character. Yeah. But the more I look into the maths of it all, and the more I look into all these occult, you know, the really deep hidden occult teachings on this stuff, it does seem to connect to the universe. It's all done through those 3, 4, 5 triangles that the Masons love, and the Pythagorean triangle, right angle triangle, who it's named after. But you can see that goes back to Babylon. And there is something special about when you put, like, you'll know from the, you know, Pythagorean tuning, like 432, 216, all that stuff, 432 hertz. You must have heard of that.
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah, 432. That was like the original middle C, wasn't it? Before the move to 440 in it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I understand why a lot of people put a conspiracy theory on that, but I understand why, because there's something called the Pythagorean comma. Every time you go up an octave, there's actually a little gap between the octave before and the octave after. So it sounds like if you go too many octaves up, it just sounds
out of tune.
Really bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got to even it out, but you could have evened it out differently, I think. And it was actually, was it Hess? It was some Nazi that had done this, some occultist Nazi. So it is suspicious, but I can understand why.
So is it kind of like they had to alter it just to make it fit, just kind of like how they give the leap year for the
exactly that kind of
thing. You know, just something to keep it ticking over in a actual order.
Yeah. I mean, like that's to do with the year. You'd want a year because you can divide a circle into 360 degrees very easily. You'd want a year to be 360 degrees, 360 days to fit that. It's that same kind of concept, but it isn't. It's 365. And that 5 is exactly the same kind of concept as that Pythagorean comma. It's this, we've got this extra bit. What we're going to do with it? The Egyptians and lots of other those old cultures just sacked them off and went, we'll just get drunk.
5 days.
We'll just get drunk on those days.
I would definitely like that. I think we should do that. Should we petition for that here and just have a 360-day year and 5 days of
and then 5
just a write-off bed duvet days?
No. We've got to have them all at once and then get completely. We've got to all go to a different country where these things are legal. Go and have those little psilocybin nuggets.
Yeah, that's it. Reset the brain.
God, it would be good. Some big Dionysian festival. I mean, that's what Christmas used to be to some extent. You were copying the year. So as the sun's, so you know about equinox and solstices and all these things. Obviously, you must know a little. So the sun actually does die, as it were, for 3 days on the 21st on the winter solstice, because it goes so far up in the sky for 3 days and it doesn't really go any different. It just gets a little bit up and nothing happens. Then on the next day, on the 25th, you can visibly see that it's gone a bit further up and a bit further north. So it's died for 3 days and then it comes back. And I think a lot of those shamanic festivals, Saturnalia, and before that, probably what the Pelasgians were doing, or a lot of these old mushroom cults, all the Vikings and all these guys, they would have been doing some kind of shamanic drug, dying for a couple of days, going into these underworld places for a couple of days, coming back revived, like Dionysus festivals.
Yeah.
How do you do? You're copying the year, you're copying the sun. The old year's got to die, the old year's got to die, and then you come back for the new year. I think this would be really good for society. Full stop. One that we all engage in at a similar time. And Christmas is just a piss up now, and it's something like that, though, still, isn't it? It's like you kind of forget the outside world. You contract to your family. You eat too many chocolates and drink a bit too much. But it's almost like January's for the cleansing rather than that period, if you get me.
Yeah, I think there's a huge disconnect, though, between nature, isn't there? Do you know what I mean? I think that kind of like those core things that you've just said, everybody still really likes it for that. And then the flip side is it's all about buying and, rather than connecting it to what's actually going on with the universe and with nature.
Yeah, like your own soul, as it were, and how that connects to the universe.
Yeah, so
we can't change these things. Yeah, the culture's too widespread. There's no. It's getting more and more homogenous rather than the other way around. And anything other than what everybody's doing is going to look like a cult. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get that completely.
But then there's the cult of you and your mates, or there's the cult of you and who you associate with. And if you all are naturally doing that kind of thing at that time of year, it's great. Why not do it? And maybe they'll spread that out to their mates and all mates. And, Well, how many people were doing mushrooms 20 years ago? Not many at all. It was the advent of the internet and Terence McKenna videos.
I've got a really cool anecdotal story, actually, and this is when it's probably in my early 20s, and we went camping down by a lake in Cumbria, where I'm from. And in the morning, like, we were a bit hungover, and we woke up because there was this like old lady with a carrier bag, and she was just like wandering around between our tents and stuff. And then she was out in the fields, and everyone was like, "What's she doing? What's she doing?" And she literally came up and she went, "Want some magic mushrooms?" Like that. And she had a bag full of magic mushrooms. This old lady, grey hair. No, she wasn't Welsh, but she was just out there. Yeah. I think that was just my Cumbrian accent, maybe.
You want some magic mushrooms, boy?
That's what honestly, Cumbrian language is mental. Like the accent and stuff. But yeah, she was just like, "You want some magic mushrooms?" And we all were just burst out laughing. But at the time, we were like, oh, you know, you've heard stories that they basically you have a sniff of a magic mushroom and it ruins your life forever. So we just kind of laughed. It's like, oh no, but thanks for offering.
And then sooner or later, you become that old lady.
Yeah, that'll be me in 20 years.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, getting out in middle of morning, just picking them.
So what big projects have you got going on? I saw you were making some pretty cool videos for a while. I like the production quality. It was really good. And your view count went up quite a bit. I saw that too. So obviously that's taken a little break. But have you got any like bigger projects coming up?
So I've done a couple of lives. I did a live on Larissa, which is connected to the Pelasgians. Then last week I did another live, which was looking at the genetic study that I mentioned earlier about Britain and these matrilocal kind of societies. And then what I did is I just dug up all the classical sources that I could find, which kind of corroborated that. And then I'm looking into tomorrow night. I'm looking at the figure of Maeve, who's in Irish mythology, and she's a really, really interesting character. Her name, it's debated. Her name is either comes from the same root as mead, so her name could potentially mean something of like she who intoxicates or the intoxicating one, or another proposition by the scholars is that it's connected to a word medwa, which means rule or conquer, which is a cognate in ancient Greek, meadow, and that's ultimately where you get the name like Medusa and stuff. Medusa is like a female participle.
Medusa and Medea as well.
Yeah. And even more interestingly, she's involved in a ritual called Banish Riga, which means a kingship wedding feast. So if you wanted to be king, you had to sleep with Maeve. She initiated you into the position of king, and she seals this deal by handing a mead cup. And other scholars have even pointed out, they go, look, it's kind of like a Hieros Gamos kind of ritual. Certainly. And they even connect it to, you know, Inanna, Ishtar, Venus, Aphrodite kind of figures. So
I forgot who said it, but somebody said, I think that anybody who wants to be a politician should do at least 8 ayahuasca ceremonies before, you know, to clean them out and to give them that Hieros Gamos, you know, link them back up to that thing, so they've actually got a backbone and they're doing it for something, and they're realizing that the world's more about more than them, you know what I mean, and their personal selfish desires and whatnot.
The bigger picture.
Yeah,
definitely resets your it resets you, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the actual trial of it all, because they're not easy, you know, these kind of shamanic rites are very difficult to go through. They're not easy at all. They're frightening before you do it, and they are freaky while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then some of them can be so life-changing afterwards that you've got to have a firm grip of yourself.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You got to work on yourself before you go into it. And I think going back, you know, initiation kind of had this stage where you prepare yourself, your mind and body, which is, you know, you can see why that would need to be done. I don't know if people are still, you know, taking it as seriously, you know, these days as maybe they once did. I'm not saying, you know, there's anything wrong with people doing it these days. That's not what I'm saying at all. But just, I mean, in the preparation leading up to it.
Yeah. Well, I think when you do that, you charge it up with something more than it is on its own, you know, because it's having an effect on you. And if you're in a certain mindset, like, you know, like Eleusis did make you walk for like 7 hours or however long it was, 12 hours to get to Eleusis before you actually could do the challenge. So you were very hungry, you were cleansed somewhat, and you were tired. So you couldn't resist these things quite as easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a bit. You can resist what? Sorry.
You can resist the drug.
Oh, yes.
You know, you can. And I mean, that'll be bad. Don't do that. It can make things very difficult. and kind of break you a little bit. But these things can be, these changes that are brought on by these substances, these potions, can be resisted somewhat, and that's not good. You've got to.
No.
The whole point of it is to submit yourself, to relax into it and let go.
That's it. You got to submit to the journey, don't you? Really, submit to that descent.
This has a reflection for the rest of your life as well, and you know, especially for politicians or anybody that wants to rule other people, to be in contact with these kind of things and to go through these kind of initiations and trials. You know, they are a trial. They're very difficult to do. It's much like those pain trials that you see the kids go through in Africa or South America, where it's like you got 2 baskets on your hands and they're full of fire ants and they're all biting your bullet ants or whatever. You're like, I want it to end.
Yeah.
It's like if you can put up with that, you can put up with anything. And it's the same for these. You know, there's a lot of anxiety and weirdness that goes into it, and not every trip's a pleasant one. In fact, it's pretty much 50-50.
And I think it does something psychological, like what we were saying earlier about martial arts, you know, doing something that's tough and not giving up. And that's kind of like what you're saying about those pain rituals. It's not that the trick isn't that it don't show that it hurts, because it obviously does hurt and everybody knows it hurts, but it's how easily do you give it up? Do you instantly go, oh, no, I'm not doing this, it's too much for me, really? Or do you go, I know it's hurting, but I'm going to hold on to this for as long as I can? And how does that change you as a person? How does that make you grow?
There's a scene in Dune that's like that, right near the beginning, where young Paul Atreides, the Luke Skywalker of the piece, puts his hand in a pain box. Now, in actuality, there's nothing happening to his hand, but it's like acid is burning it away. It's on fire. It's being stabbed. It's like, it's like, can you sacrifice yourself to it? That's what it is. Can you sacrifice all your wants and desires, which at that time are just to feel normal, for this trial, for this ritual? Can you be, especially for men, can you be a man? Is what it is. Can you make that sacrifice, which is the symbol of the West, is it not? A bloke sacrificing himself on a tree.
Yeah, I get that.
Has been the symbol of the West since forever. You know, for you can consider Jesus, but Odin and all these other kind of characters.
Yeah, that's it. I believe there was even the Isus, the Celtic deity, which also has some kind of similar symbology as well. So that you're right, that the whole concept of, you know, being fastened to the tree seems to be quite an old one.
Yeah, really old. I mean, it's in my book, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But it goes. It's pretty much ubiquitous, that idea of it was often a snake nailed to a tree as well. You know, you think about Moses' brazen serpent on that pole. It's the same. It's all the same idea. It's getting beyond fate, is what it is, and what the universe has to dish out for you is the idea of it.
Yes, ultimately getting above that that destiny.
Yes.
That ultimate kind of fate.
Yeah, exactly that.
Very
my friend.
So what was that, bud?
I was gonna start wrapping it up.
All right, yeah. However you want to do it, bud.
So we've said what you've got coming up. You were saying you were making some more videos? Is that right? What will they be on?
So I've also been doing the history of the Brigantes tribe, who are the largest confederation of Celtic tribes in the north of pre-Roman Britain, and I've been looking at the mythology and how the Irish mythology seems to have connections, seems to put them in Scythia, and I've done videos on this before, but I'm compiling it all into one kind of video, and how there's connections to Scythia, and how actually Phineas in Irish mythology has got a lot of similarities with Phineas in Greek mythology, and how in one of the sources, one of Phineas's sons is called Clutius, whereas in the Irish mythology, the descendants of Phineas go on a sea journey, end up in Galicia, and it just so happens in Galicia there's 15 inscriptions of the name Clutius. So which to me is quite. If you've got archaeological evidence, that's pretty interesting. So there might actually be a connection between Phrygians and Brigantes. So that's what I'm piecing together at the moment, and I'm actually going to release it as a book, and I also want to do it as a journal to go out, an academic journal. So
cool.
that's the plan. Videos,
so
books.
How long do you think that's going to take you for the book?
Well, I'm hoping to kind of do it at the same time, to do it as a book and a journal at the same, ultimately do it at the same time, but just process the information slightly differently for the two. So I'm going to try and do them at the same time, but just process the information in two different ways. But how long that's going to take, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming up to I'm nearly finishing my book. It's been an on and off thing.
Yeah.
But that was the most difficult thing. It wasn't getting the information. It was how do you then process it and put it all together? And it's a flipping nightmare, especially as the stuff I'm dealing with is secrets in the first place. Is like what's behind all the codes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute nightmare. Though I am on a chapter now where it's just pouring out of me because I've done all the setup, and it's like I can just tell them everything now. I don't need to be mysterious, because half of it is when do you tell them the information that you want to tell them, because you've got to build it up a bit first. Then when do I spill my beans? It's very difficult, mate. I wish you all the best with it.
How long have you been working? How long have you been working on it, just out of interest, just so I can kind of know what to expect?
I've been writing it over about 3 years.
Yeah.
But in spits and spurts.
Yeah.
Though, because of the kind of information it is, and it might be similar for yours actually, some of it was like, oh, I get this, and then you find another piece of information and you've got to fit that in somehow, and you can't quite, because you don't understand it, and you've got to kind of fit it in. And some of it's about letting the information settle in you. For me, the ultimate revelations in the book have been settled somewhat for about 1.5 years, 2 years now, and I've done that much talking about it on the internet that I feel comfortable with it in myself to write it down. I think it'd be probably a little easier for you, although you're talking about deep history, so it's not easy. It's not easy. I would say give yourself a couple of years, but a man like you probably get it done within one, realistically, the amount of time you spent on it.
I'll just hyper focus on it,
that's what I've been doing. That's one of the reasons why I stopped going to other countries to smoke cannabis and then coming back.
Yeah.
It was weird how I did that every night when the sun went down.
Yeah, cheap flights.
Yeah.
Benefits of living close to an airport.
Yeah, it's easy coming back because you're stoned and you don't care. But anyway, but as soon as I've quit, it's I've got nothing else to do, and I'm just. It's not as well written though. I'm a much better writer when I've had a bit of a smoke. Much more interesting.
How did you find quitting? Were you a partaker with tobacco or just with? Yeah. What was
easy.
it like to quit? Easy.
Yeah. I quit 4 days ago.
Yeah.
I've not even blinked. It's not.
That's really
not
good.
Had a craving. Yeah, I think because I can. I think if it's the first time you're doing something like that, it's probably quite difficult. But I've picked it up and put it down lots of times in life. Okay, I've got to be honest. I mean, I'm not a heavy smoker, but a frequent partaker.
Yeah.
Probably every day, a little bit every day, if not quite a lot some days.
Yeah.
But no, not difficult. I mean, I still have a chuff on this, on that thing, but there's not much in there. It's like very low nicotine vape.
Yeah.
So, if my hands and my mouth want something to do, I'll just have a bit of a vape.
Yeah, or keep typing.
Easy, mate.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear, bud.
Yeah, not much of a problem. It's only bloody tobacco anyway, after, if that's the main addictive thing. And after a couple of days, it goes away. I mean, I'm sure tomorrow I'll be very angry at everybody. as
Just
it all
grouchy.
starts to come away. I'll tell you something that did happen when I woke up this morning, this is something that's happened before. I woke up, I was really hot, I was really thirsty, I felt really sick, I sweat a lot. It was like dropping a whitey. I don't know if you've ever partaken in the substance, but when you've had too much, it's like these things happen. You feel dizzy and breathless and sick and start sweating and turn a funny color.
Yeah,
That
it's
happened this
awful.
morning. Yeah,
All right.
for about 5-10 minutes. But I'm like, oh, I've experienced it before. It's just literal withdrawal. It's just that's the withdrawal part. It lasted 10 minutes and then I was done. I was fine.
Ah, good. I'm pleased. I'm pleased to hear it's been relatively, pain free for you. And fingers crossed you're done now.
Next time you see me, I'm like, oh, I'm not done forever, mate. I have no intention of giving it up forever, just for 6 months or whatever.
Yeah. I think it's good to do that though, innit? Because then you know yourself. I've not formed a bad habit. It's also good for your body to have a break from things as well and clean the receptors out.
Exactly, and just be a different me for a while. Be not more thoughtful, but more productive. I like it because I've got a bit of ADHD, or whatever the fuck it's called these days. I'm flitting here and there. My mind's quite quick. I mean, it's slow tonight, but I am coming down off like 12 months of smoking pot.
Yeah.
But, it helps me focus in one way because I sit down and start thinking instead of running around doing stuff. Running around doing stuff can be good too.
Focuses you.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm into some weird. So I mean, you're into some weird subjects. I've taken what you're into and taken it too fucking far. Everyone thinks I'm weird, but
I don't. I think you're interesting, bud.
Oh, thanks, bud. I'm a normal person still. My thing is I don't take myself seriously, so I certainly don't take the subjects I'm into seriously either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. It keeps it fun as well, I think.
Exactly. Especially when, like last week, as you have now, get down to something like the Amish Inquisition and you get to talk to people. But if you think for a minute it's not going to be a laugh and a joke throughout, you know what I mean? It's more entertaining that way as well.
I thought they were really nice, those guys. Yeah, they were, yeah. Are they fairly near you then?
They're like, I walk down there because they ply me with drinks.
Yeah.
So it's about an hour away on foot from where I live.
That's all right.
Same town, just the other side of town. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good guys.
Yeah, the race guys.
Yeah. Right. What else is going on? Oh, I should say what I'm up to. I am doing Occult Explorers tomorrow night with Snappy and Dion.
Nice.
I think we're doing some Solomon stuff.
I'll be tuning in.
Nice one. And aside from that, writing my book. I've got my tarot deck that's coming out again in March. I'll be doing another Kickstarter for that.
Yeah, I saw you mention it on Occult Explorers before. I've been looking forward to seeing it.
That was when it failed.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it did. I didn't quite make the target. Apart from that, stuff coming up. I've still got this Netflix thing that I'm doing, but that's going to take a while. I want to write my book first. By the way, I'm kind of talking to the public right now rather than to you directly.
Oh, sorry, buddy. Yeah, I'll be quiet. Sorry, mate.
No. Oh, no. It's great that you're giving me answers. I'm just like, I feel like I'm being quite impersonal.
No. I've just thought there. I'm giving you answers here, and you're addressing the audience. So I apologize. Just cut that bit out of me talking.
Yeah, I'm not trying to show off to you, dude.
No, it's all good.
I've got this coming up. I think you should watch this. No, I'm just letting the folk know. We'll have Old Boy on it again here soon because I think this was a lot of fun. Really, talk about a bit about history and then start talking about stupid stuff.
Yeah, tangents.
Never a disappointment. Yeah, nice tangents there. But they're more personal, more fun, and they're a bit more jokey than talking about people that died 3,000 years ago. Do you know what I mean? So cool, right? We should do this again at some point in the future, definitely. Maybe a month or so.
Yeah, we can swap it round. I'll have you on my channel as well, and we can ask you about all your stuff. Yeah, that'd be really nice.
Let's do that. Well, we could do that a bit sooner if you like, rather than give it a bit of a break. So
yeah, sounds good. I'll be in touch with some dates and that, and we'll get something locked in.
Yeah. And then maybe a third time, maybe we can find a subject that we both know a little about and maybe do a tiny bit of research and come and give a presentation to the nice peeps out there.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. I'll drop you an email with some ideas, because I think there's an area where we might have a bit of a crossover, so that would be a good one to do.
Yeah. Wicked. Nice.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's been great chatting to you. I always enjoy our conversations, bud. So I look forward to having you on.
Mate, I'm sick of talking to these bloody Americans all the time. I want to talk to an Englishman for a change. Shout out to all my American mates. I love you all. I'm only joking.
Yeah, we love you.
Cool. Right then, dude. Enjoy the rest of your evening. What's left of it? The hour.
You too, matey.
Be good, and I'll see you soon.
Yep. Speak soon. All the best, buddy.
Bye for now.